Welcome, physicians, to this Clinical Explainer. Today, we're getting you briefed on the pivotal nomenclature and diagnostic changes in the DSM-5 regarding neurocognitive disorders. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this material today. We know that as primary care physicians, you are right there on the front lines of patient care, and keeping your diagnostic criteria sharp is absolutely essential. These updates in the DSM-5 represent a fundamental shift in how we categorize, diagnose, and ultimately treat cognitive decline. This explainer is designed specifically for you. We're going to provide a streamlined, visually structured breakdown of the new standards directly from the source material to make sure you're fully prepared to integrate these updates into your daily clinical reality.
All right, let's just quickly look at today's agenda. We're going to cover the new nomenclature, the difference between major and mild classifications, the research rationale behind all this, the real-world risks in general practice, and finally, a practical advisory for your day-to-day.
Okay, Section 1, the new nomenclature. We're starting with a massive change. We are officially retiring terminology that you have probably used for your entire medical career. The old, kind of clunky catch-all category of delirium, dementia, and amnesia is completely out. The new overarching standard in the DSM-5 is a single, unified category, neurocognitive disorders. And this isn't just a simple facelift. It reflects a deliberate structural move to standardize the exact language we use across the entire medical community when we're dealing with cognitive conditions.
So the most crucial takeaway for your daily charting is this: the term dementia is officially gone. So, for example, a diagnosis you previously would have coded as dementia caused by head injury now literally has to be documented as major neurocognitive disorder due to brain injury. Yes, it's absolutely a longer string of words to type out, for sure, but it forces a fundamental standardization across all our specialties.
Moving right along to Section 2, major versus mild classifications.
First up is the newly introduced mild classification. Mild neurocognitive disorder applies when a patient exhibits a modest cognitive decline in one or more areas. But here is the absolute key: they retain their functional independence. You know the type. They can still manage their own medications, handle their finances, and safely navigate their day-to-day routines without your intervention.
On the flip side, we have the major classification. Major neurocognitive disorder is defined by a significant cognitive decline. And again, that functional qualifier is the star of the show here. This diagnosis is used when the patient can no longer function independently. They've crossed that threshold. The cognitive deficits are now severe enough that the patient needs actual daily assistance to get by. This table right here perfectly illustrates your new clinical fulcrum. When you're assessing older adults, the defining line between mild and major rests entirely on that independence factor. It is basically a binary switch: retained versus lost. That is exactly what dictates your diagnosis now.
Section 3, the research rationale.
Now you might be wondering, why on earth did the committee even introduce this mild category in the first place? Well, it all traces back to some really ambitious Alzheimer's research goals. We know disease progression doesn't just happen overnight, right? Decades before a person ever shows behavioral symptoms, amyloid deposits and tangles are already forming in their brain. That's followed years later by mild cognitive decline, and only eventually do we see severe behavioral symptoms.
And this brings us to a pretty harsh medical reality. Current treatments for late-stage, full-blown Alzheimer's are, quite frankly, failing. Because our interventions at the severe stage just aren't yielding the results we desperately need, the broader scientific community is searching frantically for a brand new approach to combat this disease.
The incredibly optimistic hope among researchers is this: by identifying cognitive decline in its earliest mild stages, we will eventually be able to intervene and actually halt the progression of the disease altogether. So, the mild framework was really designed just to give researchers the precise diagnostic criteria they need to test those early preventative interventions.
Which brings us to Section 4, risks in general practice.
So, while early intervention sounds fantastic in a clinical trial, it presents a massive question for us primary care docs. Our primary oath is to do no harm, right? So, should you actually use this mild label when evaluating your older patients during a routine checkup? I mean, it's sitting right there in the DSM-5, but does that mean it actually belongs on your patient's chart today? Well, the source material issues a really strong, unambiguous clinical warning against utilizing this specific diagnosis in general practice. And it breaks down the warning into 3 immediate severe risks: a lack of predictive precision, systemic consequences, and psychological harm. Let's walk through exactly why each of these makes the mild diagnosis so incredibly perilous in a primary care setting. First up is the issue of predictive failure.
Let's be real, there is simply no reliable way for you, sitting in a standard clinic, to know if a patient's mild memory issues are just benign, normal aging, or an inevitable progression to major dementia. It's like trying to predict the weather a year out. If you apply the mild diagnosis, you are making a predictive leap that current science honestly cannot consistently support.
Second, we have to talk about systemic rejection. Remember, a diagnosis doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It follows the patient everywhere. Sticking even a mild cognitive diagnosis onto an older adult's permanent medical chart can trigger terrible real-world consequences. Specifically, it can cause certain long-term care or assisted living facilities to just reject them outright. They basically get classified as a higher-tier liability way before they ever show signs of actual major impairment. It's a logistical nightmare.
Finally, what's really fascinating and tragic about this is the documented cycle of psychological harm. When a patient receives an official mild diagnosis, studies show that the label itself triggers severe anxiety. And the terrible paradox here is that this anxiety actually causes the patient to immediately perform worse on cognitive tests. Literally, the diagnosis actively impairs their real-time cognitive performance. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
All right, moving to Section 5, Final Practice Advisory.
So here is the absolute bottom line, drawn directly from the clinical warnings. Until our medical treatments actually catch up with the diagnostic ambitions of the researchers, the official advisory is this: leave the mild neurocognitive disorder diagnosis strictly to the research facilities. Just avoid using it in your standard clinical practice. You've got to protect your patients from the predictive failures, the systemic rejections, and those psychological harms we just outlined. You do need to update your vocabulary from dementia to major neurocognitive disorder for the severe cases, but definitely hold off on that mild label. It leaves us with a really fascinating and difficult question as practitioners. As medicine enthusiastically pushes the boundaries of early detection, at what point does diagnosing a disease before we can actually treat it do more harm than good? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.